Hi, friends. Hello, in the world. Welcome back to this episode of Tools for Transitioning Humanitarians. And today we're talking about a tool that many of us believe that we're just carrying this tool around and hurting people. And that tool is hurting, meaning that many of us believe that if we have honest conversations, if we have difficult conversations, if we have conversations people that with whom we don't know, then we just go around hurting other people. I don't know where it comes from, but somehow many of us are programmed to believe that this is the case, and therefore we cannot really be who we are or say the things that we want to, and therefore we keep accumulating a lot of emotions that we don't want to have. And this is something that keep like coming up in my sessions after sessions. And I thought I would just bring your awareness to several things that you can work on to see how this is showing up for you, how it's affecting your life. And if you don't want this to be affecting your life, then what are you going to do? What do you want to do to change that? And of course, come coach with me so that we can work on this together, so that you can really get to the place where you feel like you can be honest with yourself, with the other person, and do something about it. So let's start visualizing it, because I thought that this is the only way that I can get my message across in the way that's so clear and understandable. So let's first look at what is happening, right? So let's say it's a work conversation that we want to have or we think that we should have. And then the belief that we immediately have about that conversation is that I'm afraid to hurt someone else's feelings, or the person that I'm going to talk to, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt their feelings. When we think that, or when we believe that, what is the feeling that comes up immediately? Is a fear, right? So we are afraid to have that conversation. Even though we believe that it could be useful for the improvement of the work, for many other things, but we are afraid that we will hurt their feelings. When this is the case for you, ask yourself, how do you behave when you're afraid to hurt someone's feelings? Like, get really curious and granular as to how do you behave when you feel that. The same goes for, it doesn't have to be a work conversation. Replace it with any other conversation, replace it with a relationship, with personal things, whoever it is, the context. If you believe that I'm going to hurt someone's feelings, then how do you behave when you feel that fear? Here are the things that my clients tell me how they behave. And I'm just going to use their example. But of course, you can be you can be very specific in understanding for yourself how you behave for when you feel this way. So my clients tell me usually this is that they say that they can't really say the things the way they want to, or they try to say it in the way that they feel like they can like go around or try not to hurt their feelings, which make things a lot more complicated or convoluted for the other person to understand. And if they don't want to do any of these efforts, they just avoid doing it altogether, right? And therefore keep not being honest, meaning keep not saying the things that I actually want to say, but they can't say it. And then they keep imploding inside, meaning keep having all of these emotions, keep suppressing their emotions, keep like accumulating all of this. And then one day they explode, but on their own, because they're afraid that if they're going to say the things to the other person, they will hurt their feelings, or they may explode in front of them, and they feel like that's very harmful, right? And that's true, but imagine if we didn't lead our situation to the level where we are afraid of being exploded in front of someone else, then we would be like doing something about it, right? So therefore, what they don't do is they don't trust themselves that they can have a non-hurtful conversation, and they don't trust the other person that they are able to hear the conversation in the open, honest manner. Now, what this leads to is, oh, and the other one is they don't create a space for honest conversations themselves as well. Because remember, we are most of the time projecting what we believe is true to the other person, right? We are projecting whatever is happening for ourselves to the other person. And in many ways, it's very useful. But in some ways, it may also mean that if we believe that someone else has a difficulty having honest conversation with us, then it probably also reflects as to how we are probably afraid of having honest conversation with someone else if someone else wanted to come to us to have that. Therefore, we're not creating that space for that honest conversation when it comes to ourselves as well. The consequences of that behavior is that we don't improve that work situation that we want to improve so badly. We don't get to improve ourselves because we don't really say the things that we want to say that could have led us to maybe improving later, as to how we could have that honest conversation with the other person, or maybe the other person could give us a feedback in response to that honest conversation that we could improve upon, but we're not doing any of those things. We also keep the status quo, meaning that things don't change and things keep being the same way, which we probably don't like, but we continue being in that environment and feeling like powerless and feeling that we can't do anything about it. And then the worst part that I think that keeps happening is that we keep not being ourselves. We keep like in the performing energy, we keep in this like mask or everything is okay and nice energy, but not really being ourselves and saying the things that matter to us. And the other thing that is continue happening is that we don't learn to trust ourselves and we don't learn to trust other people that they can handle and we can handle it too. And all of this result in we keep hurting ourselves. And that is the part that we need to stop doing it. Now, let us go to what we're not learning in that process if we keep being led by that fear. Things that we're not learning is we're not being honest, right? We're not learning to be honest with ourselves and with the other person. We're also not learning to take responsibility only for our own feelings. We're now taking responsibility for someone else's feelings, right? Because when we say that, oh, we may hurt someone, we're essentially saying that I need to take care of the other person's feelings. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm just saying see how you are trying to do the thing that you have no control over, because other people's feelings don't depend on us. They depend on their own thought processes. So therefore, we are taking responsibility only for our own feelings or our own thoughts, our own behaviors, but we keep not learning that because we're so much in the other person's brain. We are also not learning to be who we really are. And also learning, okay, if that's not how I want to handle the conversation next time, how can I improve and learn? That's not what we're doing, right? That's not what we're learning. What we're also not learning is to trust ourselves and the other person, that we are two adults who are wanting to have this conversation, or one of us is wanting to have this conversation and the other one needs to hear it or can hear it and then decide what to do with that information. And we're not learning to do any of that. And the most important part that we're not learning to do is we're not learning how to have non-hurtful conversation. Frank, honest, but non-hurtful, constructive conversation. We're not learning to do that. So the alternative could be, in case we don't like the things that we're doing currently as a result of being afraid of hurting someone else's feelings, the alternative could be that we start believing or allow ourselves to think that I'm willing to learn to have non-hurtful conversation. How could that look like? What does it even mean to hurt someone? What words could hurt someone, right? What words that I will be saying could hurt someone? How does that look like? And how could I avoid that? These are the conversations or the attempts that we're not making. And that's what I suggest you get curious and good at learning. Because when we're saying that I'm willing to learn to have non-hurtful conversation, what we're going to do is we start practicing honesty, meaning what is the honest truth for myself now at this point about this work situation? This is my honest truth, right? And how can I trust myself to tell this to the other person? Be it my boss, be it my colleague, whoever. How can I do that? And these are the um, spaces we want to be in, because then at least we're learning how to be honest with ourselves, how to formulate those honesty and in the way that comes from our trusting place and not from our fear place. We're learning to say things with the intention of not hurting, but with the intention of improving the situation, right? We're also learning trust the other person, that we trust that they will be able to handle or see or hear what I'm saying, because the intention is not to hurt. The intention is to improve ourselves or the work situation. And then the most important part is we will learn in this scenario to learn to show who we really are in that space, or learn to show who we really want to be in that space, and then liking the results of it, because then at least we're being honest with ourselves, we're showing up who we are, and we're saying things with the best intentions of improving. Because otherwise, if we don't do that, this is what's happening. And I really want you to see and like understand for yourself what your assumptions are, right? Because as soon as we understand what are the assumptions behind that fear, I think it gives us a bit of like a waking up call. And I love those type of waking up calls for myself as well. So when we are saying that I'm going to hurt someone else's feelings if I have this conversation, what we're assuming is the following, right? We're assuming that they will be hurt by that honest conversation. Now, why do we assume that immediately? Like, why do we assume that that's the first thing they're going to do? Unless, of course, we went there to hurt someone, right? That's different. And I'm not even talking about those abusive, violent, verbally violent conversation. I'm not talking about that at all. And please hear me well, that this conversation is around very routine daily lives where we want to have conversations with people. Sometimes it's difficult conversations, but it requires us to be honest and trusting to have that conversation. So in those conversations, why do we believe that it will be immediately a hurt feeling from someone else? And if that's the case, you believe, what words do you think you will say that will hurt them? What do you think, like, what words you could be saying that will be hurtful to them? What do you think? And why do you think it will be hurtful for them? Why are you assuming this? Is the question that I would love for you to get curious about, right? Why are we assuming that? The other thing that we're assuming is that they can't handle such conversation, right? Meaning that we're undermining their capacity. First, we're undermining our capacity that we can't have this conversation with the other person in the non-hurtful way, but equally, we're undermining the other person's capacity to handle such conversation. Why do we assume that? And that's a curious place for us to be and understand, why do we think that? Right? And the other assumption that we're making here is that I can't really trust them for having this conversation. Again, the question is why? Why cannot we trust them? Why can't we treat them adults of saying that we're in this work environment together, we want to improve things, or at least I think this is what we want. Maybe that's not always the case, but at least this is what I want, right? And in order for me to improve this situation, I believe this is what needs to happen. And I would like to find out the reaction from the other person. This is what we're talking about. If it's personal relationship, let's say, and it's the same situation where we're afraid to hurt someone else's feelings. For instance, one of my clients is now going through some tough conversations with his partner, and he was saying that, well, if I say these things, of like, let's take a break and let's think things over, if I take this, it will hurt the partner's feelings, right? But then I was asking him, but what is the alternative? What is the alternative that we're thinking about? Not having that conversation altogether and keep avoiding and being in the avoidance. But think about, if we keep being in the avoidance, what are the consequences that we're having for ourselves, right? We're having like relationships that we don't really want to be in, or we want to think things over, but we can't really do that because we're avoiding to have that conversation with the other person. And then we're not happy with our lives. And then possibly we will resent them for how we can't have our lives the way we want to, because now we're blaming them for how we can't say the things that we want to say. But we didn't say those things in the first place ourselves. So how do we expect the other person to know about it? They will probably eventually guess by our behavior of non-committal, whatever the other behaviors that we have. In the personal relationship, especially, the other person may suspect something is going wrong, and then they may like want to talk to us. But why bring that to that level, right? Why do we bring that to a level where everything gets to a like a last minute bottleneck, like about to explode situation? Why do that when we can do that a lot earlier? And in order to be able to have this honest and saying things the way we see, and saying things in the way that is not hurtful, but with the intention of improve, or with the intention of clarifying, discussing, and coming to a conclusion, we really need to have this scheme in our mind, this truth in our mind, which is, here is us, and here are our thoughts, here are our feelings, and here are our behaviors. And when they all in combination come out to the other person, they will perceive it. In other words, they will perceive it with the like emotional, all the background that they have. They perceive it in their own way, in their own unique way. And based on that, they have their own feelings and they have their own behaviors. Now, the good thing is that we can say these things, and also realizing that we can't fully inform or create their perception of things, because everyone has their own way of perceiving things. Now, after they perceive what we say, right, this is where we're behaving, meaning we're saying things. After they perceive what we say, they then come up with their own way of how they think and feel about it. They could feel, this is not hurtful at all. I understand what you're saying. I actually want to say some other things that is in my heart as well, right? They could say that. They could say, yes, it is hurtful, and here is why. Then we will learn what we need to learn. Or they could say, oh, I thought things were totally different, but that's fine. Or whatever the way they will digest or perceive this. Now, we human beings always feel the intention behind things. If the intention behind is to have this vulnerable yet open, honest conversation, we are likely to mirror that behavior. If the intention is criticizing in the way that's not useful, we can also sense that, right? Because we're very tuned, especially at our subconscious level. So we are likely to sense it, to smell it. So that's why intention behind things are so important. And the other thing that we need to understand that that's all we can control, meaning that we can only control up to this point. We can only have good intentions, say things in the honest possible way, in the non-hurtful words that we can possibly think of, and then trust the other person will perceive it the way that we intend. And that's all we can do. We can't control how they will feel or how they will perceive it, because the way they perceive it is up to them, right? That's how they perceive. We have like no physical capacity to go enter into their brains and then make them feel in a particular way. And that's a good news. That means that we can only take responsibility for this part in the best loving way, right? In the best like contributing way, in the best solving the problem way, in the best intentions. We can do our part, and then they perceive the way they perceive, and we trust that they perceive our intentions, and we trust that they heard what we're saying, because that's our truth in that moment. Then we can have the conversation where we create space for the other person to bring their things of how they see things. They may be totally different than what we're going to say. They may be similar to what we're going to say, or they may be a third thing that we haven't even considered. And that's a great like space to create. Because as long as we don't create the space, we will continue behaving the way that we don't want to behave. And we don't create space for other people to behave the way they want to with us either, right? Because if we keep behaving the way that we don't like, and then likelihood of we then being around people who also don't really bring their truth. So that's why if we want to like create space for ourselves to be who we are and saying things the way that we want to, and most of the time we have no intention of hurting anyone. And like it's I don't know, I have never heard like seen anyone who intentionally wanted to hurt the other person. Of course, I'm not talking about discriminatory or systemic oppressive situations. I'm not talking about those things, right? That's a separate conversation. And I trust that you hear me in this, is that most of the time in our daily work conversations, also in personal, we usually have conversations where people don't intend to. Maybe the intention was one, but the wording came out not the way that we wanted, or not the way that we could have said better. But all of those nuances we get to learn more by being honest and being ourselves and having this trusting conversation. That's the only way we can learn and move forward. That's the only way we can then say, okay, I didn't say things the way that I could have said better differently. Now let me learn that. That's the only way we open up space for learning about ourselves, about the other person, about having honest conversations. So that's why I would love for you to spend more time rather studying your assumptions about other human beings and your assumptions about yourself, and spending more time to willing to learn all of this, right? So all of this learning can come from this alternative way of looking at it as I'm willing to learn to have non-hurtful conversations. And how could that look like? What could that look like? How could I have conversations where I can be me myself and still have that honest, vulnerable at times, not easy conversations, and still learn so much from it, rather than keep imploding in myself and keep not liking what's happening. So, my dears, I hope that this was helpful for you to move on in your um, own practice or own ways of like showing up as who you are, saying things with the best intentions, and learning so much from them. And that's, I would love to contribute to that world where we have that more in our lives and around us. So if you want to get coaching on this, absolutely come coach with me. I would love to do that. Have a beautiful week, and I will speak to you very soon.